We are now going to jump into the SwiftUI portion, the meat and the potatoes of today's session. So I will tell you all straight up, because I am not super confident with SwiftUI. I already did this project. I did it this past Saturday live here on this Twitch channel. So if you've seen that already, I'm sorry, you're not going to get a ton out of this, but if you stick around at the end, you might get to see a little bit of a... We might have time to add some more features, is what I'm hoping. It only took about an hour to build it on stream, so we should have plenty of time to add some more to it.
Maybe I'll be able to offer some commentary as well.
I would love that.
Also, can you share your screen with me so I'm not on the delay on the stream?
Yeah. Sorry, I thought I was. There you
Sweet.
go. Okay. Also, real quick while I'm getting set up, thank you very much, Sinfire, for the follow. Appreciate it. Okay, so the gist of what we're going to build today is something that will hit the iTunes API, and we're going to use to start out this endpoint where we are searching for a band and we're getting their songs. It gives us a pretty nice and consumable JSON format, and that's where we'll start. So we'll call this, I guess, Song Viewer, because I already have iTunes Viewer from this past weekend. We'll be using SwiftUI, and away we go.
Also, Matt, are you intending to have the music playing right now?
I am not. Thank you so much. I forgot to do that
Thanks
before.
to CPWareUp or CPWareUp or CPWAREUp for pointing that out in the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did last meetup like 45 minutes with that music rolling. I'm sorry. Thank you for calling that out. I gotta adjust. I've got anyone that wants to know behind the screen, I've got Elgato Stream Deck with all of my usual stream buttons on it, and I don't have labels for the ones that are specific for Learn Swift Boston, so I always forget to press them. And I will create a Git repository for this so that I can upload the source code. What I've been doing is all of our meetups, the VOD lasts for 2 weeks, and after that 2-week period, I do my best to get them up on our YouTube channel, which is also ! Links in the chat. So you can see all of the Learn Swift Bostons that we have been live streaming during COVID on our YouTube channel. And when there is a Git repository, which is most of them, let me amend that. This most recent one for Beginner's Night, I included the Git repository, and I will go back and add it for the other ones, but I will include tonight's repository as well. Cool. So, SwiftUI is Apple's new design language. We had, for many years, UIKit on iOS and AppKit on Mac. You might also know them as Cocoa and Cocoa Touch. Cocoa Touch for iOS and iPad. Excuse me, iPhone and iPad, or iOS. And that was great for a while, and it kind of had some rough edges. And SwiftUI is Apple's play at making it a little bit nicer. Not my iPad. So one of my favorite niceties that comes with that is this preview mode. So this is brand new when they came out with SwiftUI, and it lets you see whatever UI you're building rendered, assuming that you have a preview provider set up. So if I change Hello World to Hello Stream, you'll see that already rendered here on the right, just like that. The other cool thing about SwiftUI is that it's a very declarative, I guess you'd call it a DSL, right, Zev?
Yeah, I mean, DSL stands for domain specific language, and it kind of can mean whatever you want it to mean. But sort of generally, it's like, okay, you've got this programming language and you can do the normal programming things. A DSL is like, let's sort of carve out a little chunk of the language and make it so it's really easy to say things that we're going to say a lot. And SwiftUI is a DSL in that it uses a new feature of Swift called function builders. And it kind of doesn't look like your other Swift code. You know, in most Swift code, you're declaring variables, you're running functions. In SwiftUI, you just kind of list out what you want as like things on the screen, and it magically takes those behind the scenes and builds them into a structure that can be used to display a UI. So it's a little bit different from sort of more imperative code where you're running one line at a time, but it is still Swift. It's using a feature of Swift that is function builders, which is currently kind of quasi-private, but there are some active reviews right now going on to make it an official part of the language.
I also, real quick, just want to say that a lot of what I learned from Paul Hudson. He has a couple of tutorials about, or no, excuse me. Wow, I did learn some from Paul Hudson, but I got the most out of actually following Apple's own tutorial on this, which I did live here on the stream. I live streamed the entire process of learning SwiftUI because I have been doing 7 years of UI kit and SwiftUI terrifies me. So I wanted some help and consoling from chat. But I learned real quick that if you command click, you get this nice little context menu of things that help you build your SwiftUI views. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is embed this text in a stack. And so Zev mentioned that you can just kind of like list out the things that you want to have in your UI. And so maybe I want to ask, how are you doing? And you'll see in my live preview over here that's become not so live, that it just pops right up. And so a VStack, if you've been doing UI kit for a little bit and you're kind of comfortable with that, this is a stack view that is given a vertical access. And they've broken that down to just a single one word, and it builds that all for you. Instead of having to make an object and putting all your views in it, you just put your stuff inside this closure and it beautifully renders on the screen. Paul's site, Hacking with Swift, has a great tutorial called 100 Days of SwiftUI that walks you through a ton of stuff. Yes, that is very true. He also does that for Swift, the language. Paul does a bunch of great things for the community. And I, for one, have learned so much from that. And that's actually how I plan on learning Vapor. He doesn't have 100 Days of Vapor, but he does have a book on it. Okay, so I deleted our text, and you can see Xcode is blowing up at me. Now, why is that? Our view is rendered from this body variable. And in order to get something on the screen, this closure, or this set of curly braces, must return something. So I could return text, and it would be happy again. You can see the red should go away, but I've got my rendering back. And this is also something to call out that's new in Swift 5.1, I believe, is we no longer explicitly have to say return if something is one line. And so when we are building things in SwiftUI, you're adding attributes to things as functions. Just get rid of bold. And you can see, call out's a bad example because it's a very small change. Let's call it a title. I can't remember the term that they use for it, the Apple book. I think, is it modifiers? Yeah.
Yep.
So we are modifying our text with all these functions, and I can chain them together. Is it foreground color? And we are modifying our text by adding these things, but we're still only returning the one thing that is our text. And so I embedded the previous bit of text that I had in a VStack, because if I come here and say text, this should no longer work because now I'm returning two things, or I'm attempting to return two things. And so this is like, hey, what are you doing? Can't do that. You can only return one thing. So when you are building your UI, whether that's something you've drawn in a notebook, on a soggy napkin, or gotten a pretty comp from a designer, you need to start sort of thinking about the building blocks of your UI. I don't want to say differently, because a lot of what we have in SwiftUI was there in UIKit, but I also do want to say differently. You need to sort of look at the elements and how you're going to assemble them together. So let's keep our little red text hello here, and real quick I'm going to write a function to get our data, and it's not going to live in this file for very long, but I do want to just have it in front of me while I'm writing it. And this is where I can kind of rant a little bit, because I think I can do this more or less thinking and talking at the same time. But this was, and Zev, I'm curious what you think. This was an irk that I had when I was learning SwiftUI, is I really wish that they didn't call it SwiftUI, because there's Swift and then there's this UI code, and what I'm writing here to get our data is Swift code, but it is not the same as SwiftUI.
I like a lot that they called it SwiftUI. I mean, maybe they could have come up with a catchier name, but it's very tightly scoped to UI. You can't use SwiftUI to build a backend or a data layer or something like that. If you're building that, that's a different part of your app, and you're not going to be using SwiftUI. And like the only thing that SwiftUI has in it is views. And so if you're doing something with SwiftUI, it's at the view layer. You can use Combine and other newish stuff to hook up other parts of your app to SwiftUI. And in iOS 14, which we're not talking about today officially, so this is all in Xcode, 11.6, iOS 13 compatible?
Yes, it's the App Store version of Xcode.
Yeah. So the way you kind of set this up in iOS 13 is you set up a UIKit app using the old school way of doing it. You got your app delegate and your scene delegate, and that owns your SwiftUI view. So even if you're building a full app in SwiftUI, it's still owned by this UIKit sort of top level thing. In iOS 14, SwiftUI can own the app. So it's kind of an expression of the fact that like it's SwiftUI from top to bottom, or it can be if you want it to be. So you can have this top level SwiftUI app that owns some stuff, and they also added some niceties for like tying the lifecycle of objects to the lifecycle of views. So you could say like, let me have my persistence layer or my database layer or my networking layer live as long as this particular view controller is on the screen. So it really is sort of the UI owning the rest of the app. But like, yeah, you're putting all this stuff in this file now, but I mean, eventually we would pull it into a different file, and it really is a different part of the app. And I think I'm really glad that we're doing this sort of basic networking example, because something that I'm not very familiar with, and I think a lot of people are sort of having questions about, is like, okay, cool, I can go through the demos and make my text font background color thing, but that's all very static. How do I hook this up to the network? How do I hook it up to something a little more dynamic? And finding those places where things interface together, where the SwiftUI meets the other parts of the app, is I think a really good area to get comfortable with.
Yeah, and that in the very last stream is what I wanted to learn. I was not surprised, but still a little bit let down when I got to the end of Apple's tutorial on SwiftUI, and it was just about rendering and manipulating things on screen, which totally makes sense because they're teaching you SwiftUI, they're teaching you how to do UI things. But having not done SwiftUI yet, I was like, okay, cool, now where does all of my logic live?
Yep.
Specifically things that don't have anything to do with UI, like networking. And I know that the community is kind of landed on MVVM as being the preferred style for making SwiftUI. I think you could probably do it with MVC. You could probably also do it with Viper or MVP or Clean or whatever you want. It depends on how many hoops you want to jump through, but MVVM seems to be the thing that people are landing on.
I've seen some good stuff with Redux as well.
Yes, also that. So I want to do let results equals JSON decoder. No. There we go. And this will be response.self from our data. The thing I as much as I do like the preview window, I don't like that I can't just disappear it with this little sidebar hiding thing.
Command, yeah, that is annoying if you're into mouse shortcuts. For keyboard, Command return will hide it. Command option return will show it again.
Invalid conversion.
You're trying on line 38, but you're not doing it inside a do, so we need the JSON decoding could fail, so yeah.
Yeah. And I did not write the word response at all.
So quick and dirty example, we're ignoring errors for now. That could be something to play with if we have time at the end.
Yeah. 2 notes. Yes, MVVM seems to be picked because of SwiftUI is very kind of a reactive language. I'll kind of leave it there. I think, like I said, I still think you can do other patterns. I have yet to really see anyone do it, and I'm curious about it. But I did read an article where someone straight up said MVC is dead and long live MVVM. I was like, let's not go that far yet. So something I did learn doing my stream is we don't have view did load, view did appear, or any of those things anymore because we're not in UIKit. But we do have something similar called onAppear, and this will trigger when your view is first displayed. And there's also onDisappear. You can do some cleanup stuff. So when our view appears, I'm going to call my getData function. And I'm just going to do that real quick because I want to make sure I did not make any mistakes writing my networking code. And I need to put self in here because I'm inside of a closure.
You won't in your Xcode. In certain cases.
Sorry, what?
You won't have to put self in certain cases. Possibly that one, I forget, but Xcode 12,
yes,
you'll see a great reduction in numbers of selves.
Yes. I can hide the preview from the adjust editor options button in the top left. Good to know.
I think they mean top right. It is, let me see if I can draw on your screen. Annotate this guy right here.
Aha.
And that gives you the keyboard shortcuts as well.
Nice.
My
my breakpoint was not hit, so something did go wrong. So let's real quick figure out what I did wrong.
I know what you did wrong.
I never hit resume.
Exactly. You need a counter for that in addition to the I have Googled counter.
The funny part is I did it in my live stream too when I did this example over the weekend. There we go. Okay. So I was able to parse everything out all right, which is great. Cool. So let's stop the simulator. Let's go back to resuming this. So we now have this data object that has a bunch of results. What does resume do? Josh Swift. It actually tells iOS to run this block of code. So you can make any number of tasks you want, but resume is the line that actually says, go fire this request. So maybe you want to pre-prepare a bunch of tasks, but one by one fire them off. You would maybe set up an array that calls resume on your variable, or like an array of tasks. Or maybe you want to conditionally fire off a data task, and you only want to hit resume on one specific one, depending on some logic. So that's why that is separate from just, I've written this, let it go. Great question.
And resume is a terrible name. It should be start.
Yes.
But you can also pause and resume network requests. And so then you would have like a resume method and a start method that do the same thing. So they just figured, let's just call it resume. Is that the best answer? Kind of. But anyway.
Resuming is kind of
compromises.
Starting. So we have, from our response, I pulled out 4 variables while Zev was talking about Swift and SwiftUI. I actually want to change this to 100. And that's going to be the artist name, the collection name, which is the album, the track name, because we are searching by song due to this entity URL parameter that we're passing in, and I'm also pulling out the artwork. So my mind just went blank. So I will make a variable. It will be a state variable. I'm going to call it results, and it will be of type result in an array. Now, state variable with this @ symbol in the front is a very, very important thing in SwiftUI. It basically says, look at this thing because it's needed to render something on this screen. It's not just some variable that's out there for tracking data. I need something out of this. And so when your view renders or re-renders, the data is pulled out of here. And more specifically, state is something that when it's updated, it tells SwiftUI to go re-render itself. So knowing this property wrapper is very important. So now there is looping in SwiftUI. So I could not remember the syntax for each, but I knew that I needed a for each, which if you're just tuning in, if you command left click on some SwiftUI element, you get this nice little context menu that lets you embed things in things. And so I created this for each. And so for each results, cannot convert value to results and This is not what
you're probably going to need to identify the items in the for each by giving them some ID.
Oh, yes. Thank you. That is something that I forgot to do, is state things need to have IDs.
Yeah, and if you maybe if you jump to the docs for each or the header thing, you can see why that is. But yeah, go ahead and grab your ID first. Is it track ID or artist ID?
I think it's track ID.
What are we querying here? First name. Should we maybe call it something other than response and result, just because result is like a Swift name already?
There you go.
Okay, cool. So it's an array of songs. So we have a track ID. Yeah, so if you look at the docs for each, you'll see that it needs to know how to identify the things. You can see for each is generic over a collection whose elements are identifiable. And if they're not identifiable, identifiable as a Swift protocol. If they're not identifiable, you have to give it a key path to like, hey, how do I reach into each of these objects and find some property that will uniquely identify them? So in this case, we have an ID. So you wouldn't use something like the name because you might have duplicates there. You want to get something that's going to be unique.
And here I'm using a shorthand syntax. This slash dot is oh my gosh, my everything is just running out of my brain today. It is a key path. Got it. So this is shorthand for saying just get the song, and it's track ID. 2 notes. Your command click stopped working. I would go to your preferences and look through key bindings to make sure it's still set up. I have a bunch of conflicts, which is curious because I have not done anything custom on this computer. But that's the first place I would check. So let's bring back out our canvas. And so for each song, we should see a hello. So if I run this, we should see a bunch of hellos that are red. Oh, no, because I need to...
You're just doing a text. You're not like stacking them or anything. What happens if you do that?
Great question. This is
results dot, yeah.
Bad names for variables.
Songs on line 12, fix that.
Songs on line 12. No, that needs to be results because it's codable.
Oh, unless you want to change the coding key. Yeah, totally.
Is that it? Okay, so just because it's a single text, it doesn't do anything? Well, that's fine, because we are...
Yeah, you're doing a for each, and in each one... Oh, songs is empty right now. Songs is empty when you start up.
Because I didn't do my on appear.
Yeah, you got to do the on appear on the for each.
Yes.
Instead of on the text, because the inside the for each was never running because songs was empty to start. Yeah, the indenting is another thing that they made a little bit nicer in the next version of Xcode.
I hear that. I look forward to it. Still nothing.
You have a log there. Something went wrong while decoding. You want to spit out you want to capture and spit out the error from the try, or just look at it and see what's up.
All I did was add track ID, which is not a string.
It's not a
It
string.
is int.
Gross. Don't use ints as your IDs, people. Because then you'll get computers comparing and manipulating integers that you don't want.
So I got a bajillion hellos because 311 has been making music for a very long time.
It's also interesting to note that you didn't tell it to do a VStack, but I think there's a little bit of magic in either for each or view where if you don't specify anything, it sort of magically assumes that you want a VStack.
So let's do that. Let's embed this in a VStack. I'll go ahead and run this again, and let's see what changed.
Also, does this not work in the little preview side window because of the networking aspect?
Because of the networking aspect. So if I set some songs on the content view, it would render again.
What about live mode? If you turn on the live preview.
I don't have that option.
Go? You have none options.
Yep. You can see it's trying.
It works really well. Yeah.
Yep. And I can hear the fans on my computer going, so it knows it's supposed to be doing something. Wouldn't I want a VStack outside the for each? Good question. Let's try moving it there.
Yeah, good call.
No, that's not where I want that. Control I, if you don't know, re-indents everything for you. So let's see what that fixed, if anything.
You still have an extra curly brace?
Yes, I do.
Either one of 34 or 35 could go. There's a little tip in our new work from home world. If you're pair programming with somebody, turn on your line numbers if they're not turned on, and get used to calling things out by line number. It makes it so much easier to talk about code because it makes everything unambiguous.
Cool. Same thing.
Yeah, so we have a VStack, and instead of just listing the things in it, we're saying inside that VStack, do a loop and splat things into the VStack in that loop, which is convenient. It's really neat to see how SwiftUI kind of composes like this, where you just say VStack and then you do whatever you want inside it. If you put one thing, it'll show you one thing. And if you put a couple things, it'll stack them up. And if you do a loop, it just knows how to handle that, which is really neat.
So you said what I was about to get to, Zev. How would I list these things out?
Well, you'd have to, you mean like instead of hello?
I would like to make the equivalent of a table view.
Oh, well, you're going to want to use something called a list.
Aha.
For each will work, but it's kind of like using a stack view in UIKit if you're used to that. You know, you're kind of building everything yourself, but SwiftUI gives you this nice thing called list, which gives you rows and selection and potentially navigation and accessibility things and all that fun stuff. You're still going to have to do the same data and identified by, or songs, or whatever the thing was called.
Yes.
And I believe you're gonna have to tell it to scroll. But your preview's working again, so that's cool. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there we go.
Okay. Cool.
I do not still need the for each two notes because the list kind of does it behind the scenes for us.
Right.
And so that was Apple kind of got to it pretty quick in their demo, but that was something that I had as a question going into this, because all I heard was everyone talking about VStacks and HStacks, and I was like, okay, so just our table's gone? Can we not, like, how, you know, this thing that's been around for forever, where did it go? And it's just called list now, which is pretty cool.
Yep. And look at that. That's like none lines of code to set up a table view, and that would be like 50 lines of code in UIKit.
Easily. Yeah. Cool. So now that we have that going on, we can start to put together our UI. So I'm going to bring back our friend VStack. And inside our VStack, I'm going to start out with some text that is... let's change item to song. And I will call this song.track name. And then I also want song.collection name, which is the album name.
Tack name. The two note tasks, doesn't 12 have a new grid view element too? Yeah. Xcode 12, iOS 14 have some pretty cool things that basically replace collection view. It's not complete. Like collection view can do a lot of weird stuff, but for your typical like sort of grid or grid-like thing, there's new lazy VStacks and lazy HStacks, which give you the performance benefits of sort of just-in-time height calculation. You don't have to calculate the whole view at once, but you can compose stacks and stacks and stacks to make layouts that aren't just, you know, a bunch of things stacked on top of each other. So you can do cool like grids and very, you know, like Pinterest style layouts, that kind of thing.
And Zev, you've been doing SwiftUI longer than I have, so I don't know if it was a joke at WWDC. They said, you know, everyone was coming to them saying, how can we do collection view, and during I think it was Platform State of the Union, they basically said you could have done this all along with the list. Do you know, is this something that's just been hidden from us, or did they actually bring this out new?
I mean, you mean like lazy VStack and lazy HStack?
Yeah.
Those are definitely new,
Okay.
or at least newly public. I don't know, what's been lurking in there. So if you wanted to build, like, let's say the Photos app, with the grid of like 4 wide and then a bunch tall, you could have done it before. You'd have to make rows and do a little math into your data source to figure out, okay, I'm on row 37. So that means I need, image 106, 107, 108, and 109 and lay them out and everything. But now you can just do it with grids and lazy V and H stacks. And that's kind of mirrors how the iPhone originally was, because table view's been there since day one, but collection view didn't come until iOS 6. So prior to iOS 6, if you wanted to make something that looked like a grid, you would lay it out one row at a time with a table view. So we're kind of repeating history a little bit.
Neat.
And yes, SynFree 2015 search bar is missing. It's conspicuously missing. Hopefully they'll get around to it next year, because it's really annoying to not be able to just, like, SwiftUI is so good at, I want to make a search bar, and as I type, filter the results, because the view is always a function of the state. So if you update your state as you type, the view just magically updates. So it's really annoying not to get the platform, first party search bar. I'm guessing that's because search bars are pretty complicated. There's a lot of state management. There's a lot of UI customization. So they probably are wanting to take their time and get it right, but it's super annoying that you basically just have to drop down to UIKit if you want to use a search bar.
Yeah. So you can see our UI is kind of janky. Text is kind of just every which way. And we can solve that by passing in an alignment to our VStack. There are a bunch of properties, being these 3: alignment and spacing and content. Content is what we already have. So if I add in my alignment, and let's do leading on this, we should see everything get nicely left aligned, which is fantastic. And let's add a couple of modifiers to our text. Let's have this font be headline. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that feels good. And so then let's have this be call out. This is where you're starting to see the power of SwiftUI, where I am just trying to figure out what font best goes with the UI I'm trying to build. Caption feels good. And let's make it a little bit lighter. And I think secondary will be good. There we go.
Sweet.
So now, just like Zev said, in very few lines of code, we made an entire table, hand waving over the fact that we have some networking down below. So maybe you want to know a little bit more about your song, so let's add some navigation in. I feel like that's a good place to go next, if you will forgive the pun. So let's make another view.
Oh, place to go next. I got it.
Yep, navigation. How the Objective-C days. Yeah, 2 notes. I started with Objective-C. Actually, I was learning Objective-C the year that Swift got announced. That was fun because I had literally just gotten comfortable with Objective-C, and they're like, here's this new programming language that you should learn.
Objective-C made you really good at typing.
Yes. Okay, so again, we're going to need a state variable. This time, instead of all of the songs, we're only going to need one specific song.
It might not need to be state if you're.
You're right, because I'm not updating it.
And it doesn't even need to be a var.
It could be a let.
So this is detail view, right? We're going to be tapping on a song and going to see details about the song.
Yep.
Cool.
So you can see I've got some errors down in my preview provider. And so I'm just quickly putting together a song. And I'm just going to grab a URL from our response so that we have it. So now that we have this data object, ooh, I messed it up. Now that we have this data object, I can pass it into our song view. And because now we have some more code in there, I have to add in this return. I could just build the data object inside of building my song view, but I feel like that might be a little bit harder to read for stream.
One way that I like to do that is I like to make it a static let or static var on the preview provider called like, static let song equals, and then you just pass in return song view song.song. Because the previews var is static, so anything you want to pass in, it makes it easier if it's static. And then you don't need the return. Anything to avoid the return. Although they're improving that soon as well.
Are they?
They're going to infer return types from multi-statement closures.
Nice.
That's in proposal or something right now. Pull request maybe. So I think, yeah, just song, because you're in the scope of self.
Sweet.
Self.
Today I learned. Okay, so our song view, I know already that I'm going to want a VStack. And inside of that, I'm going to have an image. And below that, I'm going to have some text. So we have our songs listed out. So maybe we'll have this be the track name. Or excuse me, the collection name. And let's do another one. Let's also do the artist. Able to infer complex closure, return type, explicit type, disambiguate. I bet it's my image.
Yeah, I think image doesn't have an initializer that takes nothing.
Yeah.
We'll have to. That's going to be tricky because we're loading the image remotely. I hope loading images from URLs is always a little messy in SwiftUI, I found.
Yes.
You gotta do like all this code that we saved on table view cells. Now we have to pay it back by building our own image loader from first principles.
Yep. So we'll have to get another function going. Call it getImage, and we will create another URL.
And some of this, like we're doing it inline because it's sort of, a first pass. Some of these loaders and things can and should be pulled out into like, network client or image loader, because then you really can make it like one line of code. Here, say image with this URL, and then in the background it'll go and do all the URL things.
And that is some refactoring that I intend to do.
Sweet. Refactoring is so much better than getting it right the first time.
Oh, wait, this is a URL. So I can just do this. Also, you should not have this for your error handling. You should do some proper error handling. So if I create a variable called album image, all this image view needs is a name if you have it in your bundle, a CG image if you have one of those, but it can also take in a UI image. So what I'm doing, I don't know if this is actually like a suggested thing to do, but I did find that it worked for me when I built this over the weekend, where I'm initially passing it in an empty UI image, and you can see our UI should render. The text kind of jumped down a little bit, which is not ideal, but that's what you get for doing a hack, I suppose.
Something else you can do is have a, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead. I was going to say things about placeholder images.
Sure. Yeah, you could do that.
Well, especially in iOS 13 plus, you can use SF symbols, which give you some really nice things you can use as placeholder images.
You definitely do that. And you can actually create a UI image from UIKit from data. So I'll do that, or just do another blank UI image. So if we go back to our live preview,
it's got to be at state. You can't mutate anything unless it's a state or binding.
Thank you, thank you.
Which is pretty cool. Like, this is one of the amazing things about SwiftUI is it's not just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if your view was a function of your state? You physically cannot compile code where your view is not a function of your state, which is really neat. I see the problem again. Well, there's that problem, but there's two problems.
Two problems. I'm not resuming, nor am I saying to go get my image.
That's got to be the number one most common problem now that translates. Well, those are both problems, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So I have my album cover, my artist, and my album name, but those are kind of I don't want to say ambiguous, but perhaps you forgot what you tapped on. So let's just quickly embed this in an H stack, and we'll say artist.
Oh, can I show you a cooler way to do this?
Please.
That will make the text flow together nicer.
Please do.
Delete the H stack, but leave the artist colon. And then put a plus sign between text and text. Apple has overloaded the plus operator for texts. And
nice.
Even if you style one of them, it'll still concatenate them together.
Really?
And you can put an image inside a text. So you can build up basically attributed strings. Yes, it's pretty slick.
So what, I guess they showed me what the idiomatic thing would be is you should indent the plus.
Oh, I mean, ugh. Good luck figuring out the right way to indent operators on multiple line expressions. It's really gross.
Yeah. That is a complaint that I have about SwiftUI as well, is the indenting paradigm is very new and confusing to me.
Yeah. The other nice thing about doing it like this, there are some accessibility implications, because before you had artist as a text, and then you had the artist name as a text. And so VoiceOver might read those to you as, separate things, and now they're one text, so it will treat that all as one element.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. Plus the spacing. Like before, you were subject to the whims of whatever spacing the stack you wanted to do.
Right.
And now it's just a space.
Nope, don't like that. Center
you
is
could put
default.
The texts. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You could put the texts into a separate VStack that has leading alignment.
I like it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Zev. there is a limit to the number of views that you can have on an individual SwiftUI view.
Yes, there is. It'll be a while before this is fixed. So yeah, if you, like right now we have a VStack with 2 views in it. And you could put 3, and you could put 4, and you can put 10, but you cannot put 11, I believe is the limit. That's because under the hood, Swift is combining all these things together into something that can be statically represented at compile time. So under the hood, it is making something called a tuple view, which is just like a view that doesn't do anything except holding on to other views. And it's a tuple view where it owns a tuple of whatever the type on the left and whatever the type on the right. It's like it's a generic. Actually, if you do a quick open or a doc lookup on tuple view real quick, it'd be easier to just see what this thing looks like.
How would I do that?
Oh, that's a great question. So if you go to the window menu and choose developer documentation or Shift Command 0. Now you can type in any class or type that you want to look up. So tuple view is one that I happen to know we're looking for. And so tuple view is a view created from a Swift tuple of view values. So this is just used all the time under the hood in SwiftUI. And this one is just owned by, this one just owns a tuple, and it doesn't actually, there's nothing in here that says it's a tuple because you can't use Swift generics to constrain to a tuple. So it's just a T, and then SwiftUI is careful about not ever creating one with anything other than a tuple. But somewhere in here, I forget where it is, there's like a version of this that has 1 generic parameter, and then a version that has 2 generic parameters, and a version that has 3 generic parameters, all the way up to 10, and then they just don't have 11. And that's because Swift is currently missing a feature called Variatic Generics, which will let you do, that ... thing when you want to have a function take a variable list of parameters. I don't remember where to find it in the docs, but it's in there somewhere that you can find these initializers that just have literally all the values splatted out from 1 to 10 that somebody either wrote by hand or used a script to generate. And until Swift has Variatic Generics, you just won't be able to put more than 10 things in a stack or a group or in a SwiftUI element. The way around it is to use something called a group. That's just it's a do nothing view that just helps the type system by adding extra levels of nesting.
Yeah.
And so yeah, at the 2 notes, it's direct children. So you could have 10 direct children, and each of them could be a group with 10 direct children. You could just keep going like that.
Yeah, and I think another advised way to handle that is to break out views into subviews, because that doesn't contribute to your 10. Like a subview of 5 things would just be a single view.
Yep.
4C6578, thank you very much for the follow. I really appreciate it. So if I go back to my content view, actually before we go there, I clicked on all the things. In my song view, we've got our nice album art with our artist and album information, but I don't remember what track I tapped on. So I need to embed this, and I don't have it in here. It is a navigation view.
Oh, you put the navigation view in here? You don't just set navigation view title on the thing itself? It won't pick up the navigation view from the thing that pushed it in here?
I think you're right, actually.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Neither am I. Just learned about this. Is it, so I think it's dot title. No. Yeah,
so
navigation bar
title.
So let's just move this down, bring this back over, and I want this to be song dot track name. We'll see if that just magically appears.
You won't see anything because you'll have to wrap your preview in a navigation view.
Oh.
Which is a thing you can do. You can get rid of the return.
I never thought to do that.
Yeah, it's weird because SwiftUI previews are just views. You can do anything you want in there, plus some extra stuff that are preview specific.
Sweet. There is my track name. The two notes, thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it. Okay, so now that we have our title in there, let's go back to our content view, which really should have a better name. And we're going to say that this VStack is a navigation link. So if I give this a live preview, and I called that song view.
You want a different initializer. I don't know what destination name is, but that's not what you want. What would it be doing with a string? It's just destination, I think. Yeah, I think it's destination.
Right on, thank you. So I can see that now I have the little gloved hand to tap on things, but I can't tap on it because that's not part of the live preview.
Why are they gray? Yeah, why are they? Because you're not in a navigation view. They're all disabled because you can't navigate.
Ah. Did not know that would happen. There we go.
And you could give this page a title as well.
I can do that. And I also believe that I can get rid of that top area, can't I?
Oh yeah, you can do, I think it's another modifier. It's like dot, probably before the on appear. Maybe you can do it after. It's like dot navigation bar style. Navigation bar hidden. That'll do it.
Yeah. So yeah, because it's a modifier, it always returns the sum view. So you can have these in any order, I believe.
Almost always. Sometimes there are things that'll break the chain, especially around text. You'll find things that don't let you do that. Maybe navigation bar hidden doesn't. There's like a navigation style or something. Navigation view style.
Ah.
What? Oh, yeah, it's a type. So you've got to instantiate the right one, and you just have to magically know what it is. Stack navigation style. Maybe this is a red herring. Default. I'm thinking of like there's like a double column. Oh, this is like for whether you want a split view. There's like navigation title style. Maybe is what I'm thinking of. SwiftUI navigation bar style. I have had to Google things a number of times. Counter button thing. Oof, this person is using UIKit to style it. There's just a way to do like use large titles or not use large titles.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I don't remember how to do.
I'm going to quickly cheat.
Nice.
Did I just have a large title over the weekend?
display mode on navigation bar title. It's
Oh, yeah, give it a title.
defaulted parameter on navigation bar title modifier.
Navigation title.
Navigation bar title. Try auto-completing navigation bar title. But is there not an additional? Anyway, there should be a display mode as a second parameter to that. So put in your title. Yeah, that's it. So that'll give you a title. You can set a title. I don't know how to hide it. SwiftUI. Hiding the navigation bar would be. Oof, this person is sending UI application lifecycle event notifications.
No, thank you.
That's not the way to do it.
Well, you know what? We're just going to give it a title.
Oh, you give it an empty title and navigation bar hidden true. Some person says, yeah, for some reason SwiftUI requires you to set the navigation bar title for setting the bar hidden to work properly.
No,
says this person, but it doesn't work.
Yep.
All right.
That's fine.
10 points to anybody in the chat who can figure it out. The 2 notes says inline and empty text will do it. Or they say those words. I don't know if they mean it will work. Just give it a title. Just say songs.
Yeah.
This is Apple telling you that your UI design is wrong and you really should be.
Oh, this has got to be in text.
I don't think it does. Oh, you are putting it. I know the entire everything problems all at once. You are modifying the navigation view. You want to modify the contents of the navigation view. Now we can probably make it hidden if you want, but I think having a title is usually better. But just to try it out. Amazing.
There it is.
Yep. So we were modifying the wrong thing, and it can be a string.
It can be.
Yeah, I think text might actually be string representable. I should check that, but I think it might be.
I will chalk that up to my naivete.
Maybe not. I'm actually not sure.
It's working. It's rendered.
Cool.
Thank you very much for the help, the 2 notes. So we've got our list all together, and if I tap on down, we see down.
Now we get a good back button title, so that's a good reason to have a title, because the title on a nav view is always the title of the previous screen.
Yes. So here's something. Zev, do you know how I would wrap this title? Because it is too long.
You could try changing the style to inline instead of large on the song view. I don't know if that will work, because that's on the navigation bar title. So that's the comma. And you can change your maybe it does have to be you're not using a string literal, so maybe now it wants it to be wrapped in a text for the track name, not the display mode. And you can just do text. Text takes a string. You don't have to interpolate it or anything.
Pardon?
You can just do text and then song.trackname. You don't need quotes and backslashes.
Gotcha.
To be really pedantic, you'd want to do text verbatim song.trackname. Otherwise, it'll look it up as a localized string, and we don't want to interpret the track name as a localized string. That's a little esoteric, but if you don't do it, you could get surprising results. Anyway, Let's see if this works. We'll see if we need to modify the title for the preview.
We're getting a black screen.
And Sinfire 2015 is suggesting using a line limit nil attribute on the text to change the line limit, but let's see if we can actually get it displaying at all before we try to change that. Maybe just run it, because the previews have obviously given up the ghost. This is a thing that happens sometimes. Nil, not zero. It's
Really?
different than UIKit.
Oh.
Yeah. I think that makes it no longer a text. Maybe. I might be wrong.
Oh yeah, let's give it a run and let's see.
We are all learning this together. Yeah, I think line limit returns some view.
Yeah, so our preview is broken, but it did go to inline.
Okay, so can we check it on a long title?
This is the long title that was cut off before.
Oh, well, great. I doubt it will wrap to multiple lines, but it at least gives us better room. And this could be a case where you think, okay, UIKit really doesn't want me to have arbitrarily length navbar titles. So maybe the way to do this is not have a navbar title, or have a more generic, shorter navbar title, and then have the song name be inline. That's just a consideration to be thinking about. And like, anytime UIKit expresses a really strong opinion, at least try and figure out why they're saying what they're saying, and then decide that, no, I actually do have a good reason I want to do it this different way.
Yeah. Okay, my
Also,
dog has been crying for like 15 minutes, so I want to take a quick break to take him out again, even though I took him out right before stream. So hold tight. I'll be back in less than 5 minutes, and we're going to refactor a whole bunch of these things to use MVVM. So
Sweet.
stick around.
Hit me up with questions in the chat while we're waiting.
Okay, I'm back. Whew, a little bit out of breath.
We had a question. Have we done a session on debugging a Swift app?
We have.
We did do a debugging session. Is it still online? Oh, do you put it on YouTube? I can try and
put
find
it on
YouTube.
! Links in the chat. You can get our YouTube channel. I believe it was the first or second session we did online.
Cool. I will grab a link to that specific session. Oh yeah, debugging. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
I think we got some really good stuff in that one. So here is the debugging session.
Hey Mukasa, how do you handle spacing and alignment in between views? Are they modifiers? Thanks for the session. Yeah, we're happy to do the session. So if you're talking about a VStack, they have spacing in them. I wish that this preview wasn't broken. Let's get rid of
Xcode.
Let's get rid of the navigation title real quick. No?
I think previews are just dead. I think we gotta.
Yeah.
First quit Xcode, take a drink.
Catch my breath from running outside with the dog. He was very excited. We ran into a new puppy that just moved in up the street. Let's see if my preview is going to come back.
There are various processes you can try killing an activity monitor, and then you sacrifice a rubber chicken and light the incense in the correct order, and sometimes that'll bring previews back. But
I hear they've also gotten better in the new Xcode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's we're starting to get there. I mean, remember how rough Swift was the first couple versions? If you were around for that, like, it was rough, and then it got better and better. And it's also really encouraging that SwiftUI is completely code compatible from the previous version to, or the version we're using in this demo to the version in Xcode 12. So they're getting better at improving forward compatibility and backward compatibility and stability over time. And so it's encouraging. But one thing about SwiftUI is, like, at least right now, you can run into some pretty hard walls where it's like, well, I guess I'm not using SwiftUI anymore. Like with UIKit, everything is views. So if you really needed to, you could always drop down into the views and do some shenanigans. And with SwiftUI, it's like, well, I guess, whatever goofy thing I'm trying to do with a navbar title just isn't supported. So I guess I'm not doing that, which can be frustrating.
There we go.
Cool.
So VStacks and HStacks we've been doing alignment, but they also have this spacing property. So if I wanted to give this, let's say 8 for spacing between everything, all the items that are inside of that view stack would be 8 apart, and maybe 8's too small to notice, so let's make it 24.
You're spacing between the image and the other one, so yeah, now you see it because the image is loaded.
Yeah. So let's do one that's a little bit more apparent. There you go.
And that's, oh, you were going to say it. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's also this spacer view that's there for padding things. But it does take up all of the space.
It makes sense in some contexts, but usually not when you're doing a full screen view.
Yeah, I mean, I could see an argument for putting the spacer down here and having all of this pushed up to the top.
The other main place where you'd use a spacer is like if you're inside some view and you want variable spacing between different elements, you can't just set the spacing on the VStack because that would set it for all the space between all the things. So you can use spacers with they take a parameter for a width or height or whatever. So you can tweak it a little more. Min length. I forget why it's min length. It's kind of like, it won't get closer than that, but it might get bigger if there's extra room.
So I bet if I did one here and I did another one here, excuse me, here and there and there. Yeah, so this pulls that a little bit off the top, so that's probably why you have the length.
Yeah, but like if you had 10 things and you wanted 10 pixels between the first pair and 20 pixels between the second pair.
Yeah.
Trick question, if you had 10 things, you couldn't add any more views. You would need some groups, but yeah.
Cool. Is it possible to do selections in the list applet?
Sections, I think.
Oh, sections.
You can do sections, right? I know iOS 14 added some amazing, cool, magical section stuff, but I believe list has a sections thing. If you Google it, you'll just get iOS 14 stuff, so
yeah,
honestly forget. Maybe not. But there's a way to do grouped. And maybe grouped list. Oh yeah, you can, there's a section type in SwiftUI. Updated for Xcode 12. Oh, maybe not. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's a thing called section. There's a type called section, and you can use section inside a list. It's unfortunate that this Paul Hudson tutorial is updated for Xcode 12 because now I can't see the Xcode 11 version, which would be really useful because we're, Xcode 12 is still in beta. But yeah, there's a section, and then you can add headers and footers, and you can use like a for each inside your list to chunk your items into sections. It's just that in iOS 14, it's so much more powerful. You can do arbitrarily nested deep sections. They did some really cool demos at WWDC where they're like, we've got a list of, the nested layers and objects in a drawing program. Let's use 2 lines of code to turn it into a deeply nested list with expandy triangles that works on iOS and macOS. It was really slick.
Bob Gilmore has a good question that Zev, I don't know the answer to. He asked, so spacers with parameters are the way to pull off the SwiftUI version of UI stack view.set custom spacing.
Yep. And it's nicer in some ways because in the UI stack view version, you have to kind of like it's keyed by the view, so you have to sort of manage which view gets which spacing, and if you remove the view, what happens. And in SwiftUI, it's just completely declarative. You just put it in your view, and maybe some of it is inside an if, and then you just get the spacing that you said. So it's a little bit simpler conceptually, but yes, that is how you do custom variable spacing inside a stack.
Great question. So we're going to do some refactoring now. I'm going to make 3 groups for models, views, and view models. First thing is the easiest thing, so actually before I do that, let's just go ahead and quickly commit this. Ooh, I don't have an ignore yet. Oh well.
Git Ignore.io.
Yeah.
I grabbed a little, like, they don't have a good command line thing for Git Ignore.io, but they have a bad one, and I've been using it, and it's better than nothing. Ooh, they have a new UI, or new color anyway.
And I'm just putting in all those things that gitignore.io made for me so that I can get rid of a whole bunch of crummy files that people don't want in their systems that are very specific to my user, like that. So git rm songviewer.xcodeproj/xe user data.
You can just git reset and then git add again, and it'll just stop trying to add files that, like, if you just type git reset, it will unstage everything, and then then you can just add stuff and it won't try to add stuff that's now ignored. So yeah,
I was just very terrified because I've only ever done hard resets.
Yep. Git is not a good interface, and it does things like, oh cool, reset is the same command for remove things from the stage or completely blow away your changes, depending on which parameters you pass to it. Why would that be intimidating?
Cool. All right, so the easiest thing to do is just move my 2 views into the views directory, and that's our first refactor. Oh, my dog's crying again. Next, simplest thing is to move our models out. So we have 2 models. They are our content view, our response and our song. So I'm going to make a new file, and this will be just a plain old Swift file. And I'll call the first one response. And I will move our response code into there. And I'll make another one called song. And I'll move our song code into there. So already we've cleaned up our content view a good deal. Let's now get this networking out of here because it does not belong in a view. And that's where our view model is going to come in. So if you're not familiar with MVVM, it is a design pattern like MVC that describes how data gets put onto your view. So in our case, we have our view. That is our SwiftUI view. It's straight up called a view. And we have our model, so that would be our response or our song, or a list of songs. And we need a way to get that model data onto our view. And it used to be with MVC, you'd have something in the middle called a controller, but we're swapping that out with something called a view model. And a view model kind of differs in a way that we have this data binding. So this data binding gives a reference to properties that are on our view to the view model. So the view model can say, hey, property on this view, update yourself. And when it does, because SwiftUI is a reactive DSL, the UI will just update. Zev, did I say that right? I feel like I said that right.
Yes, but the way I like to think of it is basically that MVVM and MVC are two names for the same thing. Like, you could swap in ViewController in this diagram, and it would basically be the same as Apple's, MVC traditional diagram. I think the reason we talk about MVVM is that Apple tells us to use MVC, and then they give us this type called ViewController, which is not a view or a controller, it is a ViewController, and we're like, what are we supposed to do with this? So I think MVVM is like, okay, Apple, you had one job. You were supposed to give us tools that were good for model view controller, but instead you gave us model and view controller. And so we had to go build it ourselves. So you have your models and your views separate. You can even, like, if you're doing UI kit, I would say a view controller is probably a view in MVC. And then you still end up having to write your controller, and you've got to call it something. And we already have view controllers, so that name is used up. So we call it view model. It's like, I see it as there maybe you can come up with differences, but they're really more similar than different.
Yeah, I think the key difference, as far as I understand it, is that binding, where...
Well, sure, but you can build an MVC app with binding. Like, binding is just, I guess binding is more common in that MVVM came out of a history and a language, I think maybe out of C#.NET things, where they had bindings. And using MVVM in iOS, like the MVVM revolution was coupled with some people bringing in things like Reactive Cocoa and RxSwift and now Combine, which gives us bindings, which we never had before. There was nothing on iOS, native from Apple until last year's introduction of Combine that was like, bind these two things together so that they're always up to date. So I still think of if you're going to do MVVM with binding, like, do MVC with binding as the same thing. That is my interpretation. There are many interpretations, as I'm fond of saying, MVVM, YMMV. Your mileage may vary.
This is very confusing when there's something called model. But yeah, they are very similar patterns. And so I think a lot of people like MVVM because it's not too hard to grok if you understand MVC.
Really?
So I will make a new file, another Swift file, and let's call this song view model. My dog, what is up with him? He's just laying on the couch looking at me crying. So I'm going to make this song view model, and I'm going to, without updating anything, move all of our networking into there. And this will break all of our code, which is unfortunate, but we can fix it. So this doesn't have a song, so let's go ahead and add a variable for song. should get rid of this error. We'll need to import UI kit so we can
Is it an array of songs?
Yes. Give me one moment, please.
Sure. Quick while Matt's away. I'm a fan, at least in theory, of using the Redux pattern, where since your view is a function of a state, I think it makes a lot of sense to have you have your sort of global app state represents all the state, and then Matt's back. You have your global app state, and then you have basically the only thing any of your code does is modify that state, and then the whole UI updates. Like it kind of feels like it was born first with UI or vice versa. But these are all good patterns worth discussing and comparing.
Boop, 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 boop. I'm trying to remember how I solved this.
You could add an image.
I think this is how I did it.
Then you don't need a for song parameter.
Yes. Oh yeah, crap.
But I would have the parameter and not have the selected song. I would just have an image.
Yeah.
Just so I know where you're going with this, are you planning on making this an observable object, or are you going in a different direction? Okay, cool. Sorry, not to do spoilers, just wondering where we're headed.
What's going on here?
So you're a struct right now.
Mm.
So you'd have to make anything mutable, but yeah, we are now a class. We're something that has identity. We don't just want an instance of SongViewModel. We want a particular instance of SongViewModel that sticks around, and that now doesn't have to be mutating.
Thank you. Helps if I read the errors. Okay, so we moved all of our networking into our view model, and we fixed all of the errors by adding in our songs and our album image variables. So now how do we get our songs and our album image into our views? And Zeb nailed it. We're going to turn our song view model into an observable object, which we can then take into our content view. And instead of @songs at the top, we're going to switch this to @observed object.
Autocomplete is absolutely no help here.
Yep. What I call a song view model, and I'm going to go ahead and quit Xcode so I can get my autocomplete back.
Yep. Is it going to let you store an instance in an observed object?
I believe so.
Cool.
So here I can do view model dot songs. The ID I remember having to change, but I can say view model dot get data. Oh no, the ID I did not have to change. And then we can jump into here.
So you'll still have the song. You might have had the song in your view model,
yes,
in your other version, but in this case, you keep the song as a let, because the song view is only ever instantiated with a particular song, and that doesn't change.
I'll swap this out for my song, my view model. Get
Oh,
image.
interesting. So in this case, each instance owns a view model. So you're creating a new song view model for every song view and every content view.
You are correct. I did not want to do that.
But you could still observe. You still want observed object. You just want to pass it in and put leave. And maybe it can be a let because it's an object. I actually don't know.
And here, where we say that we're doing our song view, we can pass in our view model. We'll fix this error that wants the album image off the view model.
I've got to put it in a closure.
Yes. Cool. So I should be able to run this by adding self here. I should be able to run this. And we should see the same UI.
I predict it won't work. I predict it didn't work.
Why not?
Because when you make an observed object, it needs to know. So we're sitting here with our observed object on line 12, and we have this view model, and it renders the view once, and it goes, okay, I'll list out all the songs, which there are no songs, and then I'll tell it to get data, and it goes and gets data. But there's nothing telling SwiftUI that song view model has changed. When you're a struct, you get automatic change notifications anytime any of your sub-properties changes. But when you're an observed object, you have to tell Swift and SwiftUI which properties you want to trigger change notifications. So you're going to want to go into your observed object or your observable object and do @published on each of the variables that you want to trigger a change notification.
Yeah. Oop. There we go. Very important call out.
Yeah, and it's confusing because, like in this case, it was obvious that it wasn't working because that's a fun warning. Let me just finish this thought and we'll do that. It's important to do this because we might have had some initial data and it would have worked. We would have gotten the values for that initial data, but it just wouldn't have updated. So it's really important to remember to do that @publish. That's one of the few things in SwiftUI where, like, if you forget it, the compiler doesn't help you. Cool, we're getting these awesome purple warnings in Xcode, which are telling us that we're doing something wrong.
And in a rare occasion, they're telling us exactly what's going wrong, where we are trying to set these things that alter the UI on a background thread when UI needs to be updated on the main thread.
Yep.
So I can just quickly write dispatch queue.main.async, move that line up in there, steal that line.
And I think we had that bug previously. I'm not sure how much SwiftUI cares about stuff being on the main thread, but @publish definitely cares. Is that true? Is an @publish thing always limited to the main thread, or is there a way to do @publish on the background thread? I'm not sure.
I think if you want it to appear, it needs to be on the main thread. So maybe if the view is not loaded, you could do it in the background.
Is that the same image, or did you happen to click on two from the same album?
It is the same image. They're all from this Greatest Hits album.
Okay.
There's a different album.
Cool. It's good to make sure that works.
Cool. So yeah, I guess that's more or less what I had planned. Zeb, if you have any ideas for ways that we can improve this, or if chat has anything they'd like us to experiment with, I'm open.
Yeah, let's do chat questions. I was thinking we should refactor the view model to use combine instead of URL session shared data task, just because it's going to be a little bit cleaner.
Sure, we could do that, unless chat has something they would like to do instead.
Yeah, totally. Here, first and foremost, here for your questions. I was working through some sample code, I think from the Thinking in SwiftUI book, which is a pretty sweet book that I definitely recommend. And I basically built this same code, but instead of calling it a view model, they built a generic thing called they called it a remote, and it was generic over a particular type. So it was like one for the songs and one for the images, but it was the same thing. Oh yeah, let me get a link to that. It's the obfusc.io. Thinking with UI. So it's interesting that you can build some of these same structures, and sort of depending on how you're thinking about them, they might have different names and they might fit together a little bit differently, but we're kind of always talking about the same pieces. Like, what did we just build? We built an object that starts out with no object, with no songs, and then you ask it in a stateful way, please go get your songs, and when you're done, use a publisher to tell me about it. And is that a view model? Sure. Is that a thing that's not part of a big architecture, but it's just this type called a remote or an API client or a getter or something like that? Also, sure. Right? These things can have different names and can be used in different ways.
Cool. Yeah. Let's do that. So you did post a link to Thinking in SwiftUI. There's also 100 Days of SwiftUI that I know is very popular. It's a great way to learn SwiftUI. Yeah,
I haven't made it enough through that to know if he does networking in that. I kind of assume he does, but I haven't checked. Somebody let us know in the comments.
Yeah, I haven't done it at all. So I'm also very curious because I'd love to see what his thinking is on it. But yeah, so if it sounds like chat doesn't have any ideas, let's go ahead and turn this into some combined goodness.
Cool. I'm going to be doing this from memory and I'm going to get it wrong, but let's give it a try. So like up above the URL session shared data task, let's just sort of rewrite, like on line 17, let's rewrite this stream in a more sort of modern combined way. So let's do URL session. I think we still do URL session.publish, .shared, sorry. Good call. And then we do publisher, data task publisher for URL. Yeah, so you throw in your URL, and then instead of this, so this really gross like data response error is I think a favorite of sort of tutorials, because it's such a clear example of why a stronger use of the type system is so useful. Because data response and error on line 21, the classic parameters of URL session data task, each of those is an optional. So there are 8 possible cases of having a thing or not having a thing for each of those. And some of those don't make sense. Like you would never have no data and no error, or whatever permutations, you wouldn't have data and an error. And so they've cleaned up the types a lot in this data task. If you option click on data task publisher, you'll see that they're giving us unhelpful type alias. Can you click on data task publisher? I think that'll take us somewhere useful. Oh, it's just a struct. Do we have, we have an output and a failure. So we have, we have type aliases for the output and the failure. And wow, that's just a giant list of all the things you can do with the publisher. That's really not that helpful. As we start typing, I think we'll see some more useful things. So we have a data task publisher, and then what do we do with that? We I don't think you have to call resume, so that's nice. So we just want to take the value if it comes back, and I think we want to convert it. So in the success case, if a value comes back, it's going to be data, and we're going to want to convert. Oh, now you can see me. We're going to want to convert that data to an image, right? That's our. Oh, sorry. This is the decode. So if you do on the next line after 19, dot. I think there's actually a dot decode. Yeah, so we can say decode response.self, and the decoder throw in a JSON decoder. And then after that, let's eat the error, because right now we'll have an error coming out. You don't have to let, by the way. We'll be able to turn this all into one sort of long line. So after the decode line, let's type more stuff and see if the error goes away. On a new line, we're going to map. Is it map error? So we want to replace the errors. Type dot error and see what autocompletes come up. None autocompletes, because I am obviously missing something on this decode business. Data, I'm Googling now. Data task publisher decode. I'm gonna find somebody writing. Oh, I think I actually have request. Requires the output and JSON decoder.input to be equivalent, aka data. Oh, is it not data? Do we have to do some sort of map first? I don't. Oh, I'm looking at somebody who literally has the same error on the Swift forum. Okay, we have to on the line in between those lines, we need to dot map and do curly braces and do $0.data. I think. Let's see if this is real or if this is, yeah, okay. So I'm not sure what type $0 is, and option click won't tell you, but maybe if you command click on data, you can jump to see what it was.
So I bet that this is your data response error. Yeah.
Yes, but they are, the type is better if you jump to it or you option click on the map. Yeah, the $0 never works. So you can do foo in foo.data, and then you'd be able to option click on foo and it would tell you. Probably more, it's a publisher's map. Oh, okay, yeah, it's just a tuple of data and response. Sweet, they give you the data, they give you the response. They're both non-optional if there was a success. And this map only happens if the thing that came back was success. If you want to deal with the errors, that happens differently. Okay, so cool. So we pulled out the data from what we got back. Then we're decoding it. Then we want to dot receive on to say which key we want to come back on. Receive on, I believe, is a separate thing. Yep, there it is. And that's going to be dispatch queue.main. Forget if there's a shorthand for that, but yeah, main conforms to whatever protocol means that it's a scheduler for combine. And then on the next line, is there a dot set, or there's a way to set it to a property on a cell? Assign, it's dot assign. And that does not exist because, is that an iOS 14 thing? Let's see, combine assign to on. It exists in iOS 13. It's on any publisher. Somebody knows, shout it out. Why are we publisher? Can you do dot publisher? Is that a thing? Can you get a publisher from this? Is that, I've definitely
raise to any publisher?
Try that. I hate it, but try it. See if that gets us past this. We can figure out what the problem is later if that works. So now on a new line, do dot assign to on. on the next line? No, okay, so we're just doing this in the wrong context or something. So we'll come back to assign to on if we can figure out what's going on. So instead we'll do .sync after the receive. It's S-I-N-K. So it's sync as in, I don't know exactly where this comes from. Hit receive completion, receive value. I think we want to get rid of receive completion. I believe that's a defaulted parameter. Might be wrong. And then receive value, just do songs in self.songs equals songs in a closure. And that's what the assign I was hoping would do. And you can do a weak self if you want, but it's not required because URL session. Oh, okay, right. So this is where the compiler is helping us out, where we're not getting back songs. We're getting back like a result of songs and some error type, and we want to just say, hey, let's eat the errors first. So we still want to do self.songs equal songs in self.songs equals songs. Songs in self.songs equals songs, but we're going to have to map out the errors.
This is response.
Oh, you're right. It's still a response. Response in self.songs equals response.songs. Thank you. Yeah, that exactly. But we should still have to get rid of the error, which is fine. So after the decode, I think is where we want to do on a new line dot something to do with error. It's going to be like map error or replace error, maybe.
Map error is a thing.
I think we want replace error with, and then just give it an empty response. You need to give it something, apparently. Yeah. So we could have mapped out, like if you didn't want to deal with response, after the decode, you could map to, $0 dot. Oh, actually, let's do this because it's kind of cute. We can use a key path after line 21. But because we just don't want to deal with response, let's just do dot map and then use the / key path syntax instead of curly braces to do / dot. So this is in parentheses, not in curly braces, and it's, I think, going to be result or something, whatever the property on response is. So yeah, map / dot results. So it's a cute way to go in and get a property of something without needing to actually write a function. And then you still want replace error, but now you can just replace it with an empty array instead of a response containing an empty array. And yeah, now it's not response.results. It really is just response. Or yeah, songs. I wonder if now, if you just comment out the sync line real quick, if you do on a new line dot assign, I wonder if that exists now that we've fixed our other problems. Yes, assign exists. So now you can assign to / dot songs on self. Which is really cute because now we have an entire line where, especially if you go to line 20 and do / dot data in parentheses, then we've got this, our whole networking stack thing without actually writing custom code inside closures. It's all sort of this very declarative, like, what are we doing here? Actually, well, you deleted the other stuff, so we can't really compare them, but yeah, maybe get that back just to see what it looks like. So in the other one, like, we had these guards, and it's like, you got to read it to figure out what's going on and sort of trace a bunch of paths. And in this one, it's just so much clearer once you kind of know how to read it, because it is a little bit different, right? We're saying, hey, what are we doing? We're taking our URL, we're requesting it, we're getting back the data, we're decoding it to a response, we're going into that response and pulling out the results. If we had an error, we're just eating that and turning it into an empty array, which you might want to do, or you might want to do something with that error. We're throwing that onto the main queue, and we're assigning that to the songs property. Now, we are getting this warning because this is the sort of like who keeps this publisher alive until it's done question. I believe we can just underscore assign it to make that warning go away, because I believe the URL session loading system will keep this thing alive until it's done. Normally, if you're making some sort of binding, yeah, I think that's the right indentation. That's garbage, but whatever. Normally, if you're making some sort of chain of publishers and things, you need to assign it to some property on the class that contains it, so that when the class goes away, the chain goes away. Otherwise, you are sort of leaving this thing dangling out in the world. So you want to tie the lifecycle of it to the object that contains it. But in this case, the URL session owns it, so I think we're okay. If that is incorrect, please add me.
Yeah, that's a good way to find out.
Might be wrong. Right, yeah, let's test it, see if it works. And we can do the same thing with the image. Cool, I broke it. Oh, look, we got an error. Yeah, why was it canceled? Probably because the lifecycle. Yeah, so let's make, let's do a private property on the SongView model. So this will be private var cancelables. And I think we can do this as a set of any cancelable.
Ooh.
Or sorry, set of cancelable. Any cancelable is a type, cancelable is a protocol. And then that just equals an empty set to start. And so we're gonna add that into that set of cancelables. Okay, it's not cancelable. You can just make it an array. I forget what the good, happy, pedantic way is to do this. Yeah, an array should be fine. And then so just let thing equals all of that, and then cancelables.append thing. Or just, yeah, some people make a little trailing operator that you can add to the end that will just add it in, which is, if you're familiar with Rx, it's a dispose bag. We're making a dispose bag. And then you need an open paren at the end of line 21.
I hate that it deletes them in pairs.
Mm-hmm. There's a way to turn that off, but probably the only thing you'd hate more than it doing it is it not doing it.
Right.
I guess. Cool. Yeah. So that just adds it into the array, and then because that array is nailed out when the SongView model is deallocated, that will cancel any in-flight requests and well, I don't know if it will cancel them, but it will cancel the sort of chain of subscription going on there. Did it work? Did we confirm that fixed it?
Good question. Yep.
Sweet. So yeah, you could do the same thing with the image, and probably do some really cute things with UI image and knitting with data. So that could be fun. And yeah, they're a little weird to write, but you sort of get used to some patterns. I'm not very familiar with it because I haven't done it that much, so I'm kind of feeling my way through. You very quickly realize there are some standard patterns that you'll be using.
So this one should be simple because we want the data out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that we should be able to just map to a UI image, right?
Yes, you've got a transposed thing. Can I show you a fun, stupid trick?
Do it.
If you put your cursor between the dot and the backslash, which you've currently got backwards, Control-T will swap them.
Sweet.
That's a Emacs shortcut that comes over to the Mac. A good resource for learning Combine. I'm sure Ray Wenderlich has the definitive resource on it because they always do. I honestly have, like, this is about what I know, and I've learned it sort of picking it up. You want uimage.init, and then you don't need a $0. And then no parentheses either, unless you want to put in data inside the parentheses. But you probably want to do, or maybe you need to put data inside the init. But also I think you need a flat map because it's an optional. I think it's uppercase M. And then, yeah, I would do for the init, I would do .init, and then in the parentheses after init, do data colon. And then no parameter, just data colon. You're talking about the initializer as a function. And then, so let's see. Yeah, we're not decoding. We are pulling out an image. Gotta love the errors when stuff goes wrong. Probably still want to replace error with an empty UI image. And also there's a replace nil, which I believe we want to do. Like in addition to the replace error. Why? Well, yeah, the error is just completely unhelpful. I'm going to Google URL session data task publisher UI image. See if anybody's already strung these together. Let's see. Image.init, image parentheses. Contents of file. Okay, well, these people are doing this in a very wrong way. That's not how you do that. Oh, so here's one thing we can try to figure out what's going on is replace the shorthand version with parentheses on line 36 with a proper closure. So put curly braces and do UI image and use $0 and see if that gets us anywhere. Maybe do map instead of flat map. Session share data sets publisher for URL map. Could get rid of the map, the first map, and just do $0.data just to simplify things. Might put it back later. And then replace error with, yep, and there should be a replace nil. Oh, let's not do this inside of cancellables.append just yet. I bet that is messing with things because it's trying to resolve the whole expression, and we're not ready to resolve the whole expression yet. Yeah, that makes things so much better. Now you can put back the the shorthand if you want to, but you also don't have to. This is totally legit and probably better for beginners anyway.
Yeah, let's keep it this way.
Yeah, replace nil, and then replace. So we replace nils and errors with a blank UI image, which is not necessarily what you want to do, but it's what we're doing in this case. Receiving on the main queue. And then assigning it to the album image property. I would probably be more inclined to make the album image an optional, but it really does depend on on what you're doing, how you're using it. An empty UI image is fine. And then now you want to do your cancellables, and it's so cool that you get a warning if you forget to do that final step, because it would be so easy to forget otherwise, right? It would be like forgetting to call resume, but you get a warning, so it's impossible to forget. So this is kind of the new modern way to do these little chains, and all of these pieces are composable. You can pop them out and replace them with something else that does something interesting. Like if you have some custom error handling thing, or if you have like a fallback image, you can write a little modifier that's like replace nil with my fallback image, or replace error with my fallback image. So it really cleans up a lot of sort of procedural code that you might have written in the past. And also at any step along this chain, you can like just return this thing and then do the rest of the subscription somewhere else if that makes sense for your app. The really cool thing about Combine and RX Swift and RX Cocoa and all that stuff before it are that they give you some primitives to talk about different types of asynchronous and sort of like chaining data flow operations. Before, we just had to be like, well, I've got some stuff and I guess I'll write some code to put it over here and then asynchronously do this whatever thing and later do something like, right? You kind of always had to invent it. And now we have names for all these things. We can map, we can decode inline, we can replace errors and receive it on a queue. And it makes it just so much easier to talk about these concepts, which is really cool. Once you figure out all the stupid compile errors, but that'll get better.
Cool. So I think this is a good spot to wrap things up. We built a little mini app for viewing just 311 songs, but we did it all with SwiftUI and a little bit of Combine at the end. So yeah, we want to thank you all for watching, hanging out, and asking great questions, having great conversations. We do this meetup the third Thursday of every month, and I don't have the schedule in front of me, so I don't know what's coming up next month or what the third Thursday of next month is, but I assure you it will be amazing. I also stream on this channel on Saturdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. However, I do need to take the next 2 Saturdays off. I've got some personal stuff going on and I cannot be at my computer. So come back in 2 Saturdays from now and you can catch what I will be learning, which I believe will be some Vapor. I'm feeling up to it. Also, in the Boston Q, thank you so much for your follow, or Indie Boston Q maybe.
We'll be talking about TBA. It's going to be September 17th, and we might talk about stuff from WWDC, or we don't know yet.
That's right. Cool. So keep an eye out on our Twitter, our meetup page, as we figure out what September is going to be. And we'll see you in the next one.
Night all.